Orphan boy finds a note in his backpack. What it reveals stuns the entire orphanage. The orphanage's halls echoed with whispers and shuffling feet as young Daniel stepped into the dimly lit hallway, his small blue backpack slung over one shoulder. His clothes, neatly pressed but visibly worn, stood as a testament to the life he had lived, one of hardship, routine, and longing. As Daniel made his way to class, his sharp eyes caught fleeting glances from the other children. Their whispers buzzed around him like a cloud of insects, their sneers hidden just well enough to avoid the watchful gaze of Miss Carver, the orphanage's stern and no-nonsense headmistress. "Look, it's him again," one girl whispered to her friend, her voice just loud enough for Daniel to catch. "Always so quiet, like he's hiding something." Daniel tightened his grip on the strap of his backpack and quickened his steps. He wasn't in the mood to deal with the usual taunts today. After all, there was no one to defend him, no parents to shield him from the cruelty of the world, no friends willing to stand by his side. It had always been this way, and by now he had accepted it. But today was different. As he reached his usual seat at the back of the classroom, Daniel noticed something unusual. His backpack felt heavier than usual. Frowning, he set it down on the desk and unzipped it carefully. Inside, among his well-used textbooks and notebooks, was an envelope, crisp, clean, and starkly out of place in his otherwise modest belongings. His heart skipped a beat. The envelope was addressed to him, written in elegant handwriting that he didn't recognize. For a moment, he simply stared at it, his mind racing with questions. Who had put this in his bag? What could it possibly contain? And why did he feel a strange sense of foreboding as he reached out to open it? "Daniel," snapped Miss Carver from the front of the room, her sharp voice jolting him out of his thoughts. "Pay attention." "Weiss, ma'am," Daniel stammered, quickly tucking the envelope into his pocket. Whatever it was, he would have to deal with it later. For now, he forced himself to focus on the lesson, though his mind remained a whirlwind of curiosity and unease. The day dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. By the time the final bell rang, Daniel was practically vibrating with anticipation. As the other children filed out of the classroom, laughing and chatting among themselves, he stayed behind, waiting until the room was empty. Only then did he pull the envelope out of his pocket and carefully open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. As he unfolded it, he felt his breath catch in his throat. The note was handwritten, just like the address on the envelope, and its message was as startling as it was mysterious. "Daniel, you are not who you think you are. The truth has been hidden from you for far too long, but it's time for you to know. Find the oak tree behind the orphanage at midnight. There, you'll find the first clue to uncovering your true past. Trust no one. Friend." Daniel's hands trembled as he read the note again and again, his mind struggling to process the words. What did it mean? What truth was this mysterious friend talking about? And why now? He had lived at the orphanage for as long as he could remember. As far as he knew, his parents had died when he was a baby, leaving him with no family and no history. But now, for the first time, he felt a spark of hope, a possibility that there was more to his story than he had ever imagined. Daniel's mind raced for the rest of the evening, the words on the note etched into his thoughts. He went through the motions of dinner at the orphanage's long wooden tables, where the other children whispered and giggled, oblivious to the storm raging inside him. Ms. Carver's sharp eyes scanned the dining hall like a hawk's, her ever-watchful presence ensuring no one stepped out of line. Daniel kept his head low, shoveling mashed potatoes into his mouth without tasting them, all the while glancing at the clock on the far wall. Midnight felt impossibly far away, but he didn't dare risk sneaking out any earlier, not with Miss Carver's hawk-like instincts. By the time lights out was called, Daniel had made up his mind. He lay stiffly in his small bed, fully clothed beneath the scratchy blanket, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the other boys in his dormitory. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind outside, made him jump. He clutched the note tightly in his hand, its words a lifeline against his doubts. At last, the clock struck midnight. Carefully, silently, Daniel slipped out of bed, his heart pounding in his chest. He tiptoed across the room, pausing every few steps to listen for any sign that he'd been caught. When he reached the door, he eased it open with painstaking slowness, wincing as it let out a soft creak. But no one stirred, and he slipped into the hallway unnoticed. The orphanage was eerily quiet at night, its dark corridors seeming to stretch endlessly in both directions. Daniel moved quickly, his bare feet silent against the cold wooden floors. His destination, the oak tree behind the building, loomed in his mind like a beacon, guiding him forward. The back door was always locked after curfew, but Daniel had prepared for this. Earlier that day, during chores, he'd overheard one of the older boys bragging about a loose window pane in the laundry room that could be pried open. It wasn't much, but it was his only chance. He made his way to the laundry room, his pulse quickening with each step. The window was exactly as the boy had described, its frame slightly warped and easy to push aside. With a grunt of effort, Daniel climbed through, landing in the damp grass outside. The chill of the night air bit into his skin, but he didn't care. He was free, at least for now. The oak tree stood at the edge of the orphanage's property, its gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Daniel approached it cautiously, the weight of the note in his pocket grounding him. The moonlight cast long shadows across the grass, making the scene feel almost otherworldly. When he reached the tree, he hesitated. What was he supposed to find? The note had said there would be a clue, but there was nothing here except the tree itself. Daniel ran his hands along the rough bark, searching for anything out of place. His fingers brushed against something smooth, carved initials. He froze. Those were his initials. Beneath them, there was a small hole in the trunk, barely big enough for his hand. With trembling fingers, Daniel reached inside and pulled out a small, weathered box. It was light, as if whatever was inside barely weighed anything at all. His heart hammered in his chest as he opened it. Inside was a key. It was old and rusted, its once bright metal dulled by time. Attached to it was a small tag with a single word written in the same elegant handwriting as the note. Basement? Daniel's blood ran cold. The orphanage's basement was strictly off-limits, its entrance locked at all times. None of the children dared to go near it, not even on a dare. But now, with the key in his hand, Daniel realized that this was exactly where he had to go. He clutched the box tightly as he made his way back inside, climbing through the laundry room window with a newfound determination. The journey to the basement door felt like a fever dream, every creak of the floorboards and every gust of wind outside setting his nerves on edge. When he finally reached the door, he hesitated, his hand hovering over the keyhole. What if this was all a trap? What if someone was waiting for him on the other side? But the note had said to trust no one. And besides, he had come too far to turn back now. Daniel inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a deep breath, he turned it, the lock clicking open with a sound that seemed to echo through the silent hallway. He pushed the door open and descended the stairs, the darkness swallowing him whole. The basement smelled of damp earth and mildew, its air thick and heavy. Daniel fumbled for a light switch, but his hand found nothing but cold stone walls. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon through a small, barred window high above. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. In the center of the room was a trunk, an old, wooden chest covered in dust and cobwebs. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Daniel approached it cautiously, his every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But he couldn't. Whatever was in that trunk, it held the answers he had been searching for his entire life. With shaking hands, he opened the lid. Inside the trunk was a collection of objects that seemed ordinary at first glance: yellowed papers, a small leather-bound journal, a faded photograph. But as Daniel picked each item up, a strange sense of familiarity washed over him. He recognized none of it, yet it all felt significant, as if they were pieces of a puzzle he'd forgotten he was solving. The photograph drew his attention first. It showed a man and woman, smiling and holding a baby wrapped in a soft, knitted blanket. The man had Daniel's piercing blue eyes, and the woman's warm smile mirrored his own on happier days. They looked young, vibrant, and full of life. But the baby, it had to be him, right? Who else could it be? Daniel's fingers trembled as he traced the edges of the photograph. His heart ached with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Anger? Sadness? Longing? He didn't know these people, but deep down he felt the unmistakable pull of connection. Beneath the photograph was the leather journal. Its cover was cracked and worn, the pages inside yellowed and brittle. He opened it carefully, scanning the first page. The handwriting was the same elegant script as the note and the tag on the key. The first entry read, March 12th. We made it through another day. The world isn't safe, but we have hope. Daniel is growing so quickly, and we must keep him hidden until it's safe to return. If anything happens to us, I pray he'll find this someday and understand why we had to make these choices. Daniel's breath hitched. They had mentioned his name. These were his parents. They were alive once. But what had happened to them? Where had they gone, and why had they left him behind? He flipped through the journal, scanning entries at random. It spoke of danger, of hiding, of constantly looking over their shoulders. The entries were written with urgency, as if every word had to count. And then, toward the end, the tone changed. May 3rd. They're here. I can hear them outside the house. We don't have much time. I'm leaving this trunk in the only place I know Daniel might one day find it. If you're reading this, my sweet boy, know that we loved you more than anything. We did everything we could to protect you. Tears blurred Daniel's vision as the weight of their sacrifice hit him. His parents hadn't abandoned him. They had been running, hiding, trying to protect him from something. But what? Who were they running from? The last item in the trunk was a small, folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, Daniel saw another message in the same handwriting. Daniel, if you've found this, it means you're ready. Go to the train station and ask for the man with the green scarf. Show him this letter. He'll tell you what to do next. Trust him. Daniel's hands shook as he read and reread the note. A mix of fear and determination filled him. He had spent his entire life feeling lost, searching for answers, and now they were finally within his grasp. He had to go. Clutching the note, Daniel closed the trunk and left the basement, the journal and photograph tucked safely under his arm. He moved quickly through the orphanage, careful not to wake anyone. Back in his dormitory, he hid the items under his mattress and lay down, his heart pounding. Sleep didn't come easily, but when it did, it was filled with strange dreams of his parents' faces and the mysterious man with the green scarf. The next morning, Daniel's plan was already forming. He had no money, but the train station wasn't far. He would sneak out during free time when the children were allowed to play in the courtyard. It was risky, but he couldn't wait any longer. When the time came, Daniel slipped through the gates while the others were distracted. The journey to the train station felt longer than it should have, every step filled with the fear of being caught. But when he finally arrived, he was relieved to find the platform bustling with people, a sea of faces that offered him anonymity. He scanned the crowd, looking for the green scarf. At first, he saw nothing. Panic rose in his chest. What if he had misunderstood the note? What if the man wasn't here? But then, near the far end of the platform, he spotted him, a tall, thin man with a neatly trimmed beard and a green scarf draped casually over his shoulders. Summoning every ounce of courage he had, Daniel approached. The man was reading a newspaper, his expression calm and composed. Daniel hesitated for a moment before holding out the note. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you the one I'm supposed to find?" The man looked up, his sharp eyes studying Daniel for a moment before taking the note. He unfolded it and read it quickly, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he nodded. "Follow me," he said simply, folding the note and tucking it into his pocket. It was old and rusted, its once bright metal dulled by time. Attached to it was a small tag with a single word written in the same elegant handwriting as the note. Basement? Daniel's blood ran cold. The orphanage's basement was strictly off-limits, its entrance locked at all times. None of the children dared to go near it, not even on a dare. But now, with the key in his hand, Daniel realized that this was exactly where he had to go. He clutched the box tightly as he made his way back inside, climbing through the laundry room window with a newfound determination. The journey to the basement door felt like a fever dream, every creak of the floorboards and every gust of wind outside setting his nerves on edge. When he finally reached the door, he hesitated, his hand hovering over the keyhole. What if this was all a trap? What if someone was waiting for him on the other side? But the note had said to trust no one. And besides, he had come too far to turn back now. Daniel inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a deep breath, he turned it, the lock clicking open with a sound that seemed to echo through the silent hallway. He pushed the door open and descended the stairs, the darkness swallowing him whole. The basement smelled of damp earth and mildew, its air thick and heavy. Daniel fumbled for a light switch, but his hand found nothing but cold stone walls. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon through a small, barred window high above. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. In the center of the room was a trunk, an old, wooden chest covered in dust and cobwebs. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Daniel approached it cautiously, his every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But he couldn't. Whatever was in that trunk, it held the answers he had been searching for his entire life. With shaking hands, he opened the lid. Inside the trunk was a collection of objects that seemed ordinary at first glance: yellowed papers, a small leather-bound journal, a faded photograph. But as Daniel picked each item up, a strange sense of familiarity washed over him. He recognized none of it, yet it all felt significant, as if they were pieces of a puzzle he'd forgotten he was solving. The photograph drew his attention first. It showed a man and woman smiling and holding a baby wrapped in a soft, knitted blanket. The man had Daniel's piercing blue eyes, and the woman's warm smile mirrored his own on happier days. They looked young, vibrant, and full of life. But the baby, it had to be him, right? Who else could it be? Daniel's fingers trembled as he traced the edges of the photograph. His heart ached with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Anger? Sadness? Longing? He didn't know these people, but deep down, he felt the unmistakable pull of connection. Beneath the photograph was the leather journal. Its cover was cracked and worn, the pages inside yellowed and brittle. He opened it carefully, scanning the first page. The handwriting was the same elegant script as the note and the tag on the key. The first entry read, March 12th. We made it through another day. The world isn't safe, but we have hope. Daniel is growing so quickly, and we must keep him hidden until it's safe to return. If anything happens to us, I pray he'll find this someday and understand why we had to make these choices. Daniel's breath hitched. They had mentioned his name. These were his parents. They were alive once. But what had happened to them? Where had they gone, and why had they left him behind? He flipped through the journal, scanning entries at random. It spoke of danger, of hiding, of constantly looking over their shoulders. The entries were written with urgency, as if every word had to count. And then, toward the end, the tone changed. May 3rd. They're here. I can hear them outside the house. We don't have much time. I'm leaving this trunk in the only place I know Daniel might one day find it. If you're reading this, my sweet boy, know that we loved you more than anything. We did everything we could to protect you. Tears blurred Daniel's vision as the weight of their sacrifice hit him. His parents hadn't abandoned him. They had been running, hiding, trying to protect him from something. But what? Who were they running from? The last item in the trunk was a small, folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, Daniel saw another message in the same handwriting. Daniel, if you've found this, it means you're ready. Go to the train station and ask for the man with the green scarf. Show him this letter. He'll tell you what to do next. Trust him. Daniel's hands shook as he read and reread the note. A mix of fear and determination filled him. He had spent his entire life feeling lost, searching for answers, and now they were finally within his grasp. He had to go. Clutching the note, Daniel closed the trunk and left the basement, the journal and photograph tucked safely under his arm. He moved quickly through the orphanage, careful not to wake anyone. Back in his dormitory, he hid the items under his mattress and lay down, his heart pounding. Sleep didn't come easily, but when it did, it was filled with strange dreams of his parents' faces and the mysterious man with the green scarf. The next morning, Daniel's plan was already forming. He had no money, but the train station wasn't far. He would sneak out during free time when the children were allowed to play in the courtyard. It was risky, but he couldn't wait any longer. When the time came, Daniel slipped through the gates while the others were distracted. The journey to the train station felt longer than it should have, every step filled with the fear of being caught. But when he finally arrived, he was relieved to find the platform bustling with people, a sea of faces that offered him anonymity. He scanned the crowd, looking for the green scarf. At first, he saw nothing. Panic rose in his chest. What if he had misunderstood the note? What if the man wasn't here? But then, near the far end of the platform, he spotted him, a tall, thin man with a neatly trimmed beard and a green scarf draped casually over his shoulders. Summoning every ounce of courage he had, Daniel approached. The man was reading a newspaper, his expression calm and composed. Daniel hesitated for a moment before holding out the note. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you the one I'm supposed to find?" The man looked up, his sharp eyes studying Daniel for a moment before taking the note. He unfolded it and read it quickly, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he nodded. "Follow me," he said simply, folding the note and tucking it into his pocket. Daniel followed the man through the train station, his heart racing. They weaved through the crowds until they reached a quieter area, where the man led him into a small cafe. They sat at a table in the corner, away from prying eyes. "You look just like them," the man said, breaking the silence. His voice was low and steady, but there was a hint of sadness in his tone. "Like who?" Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. "Your parents," the man replied. "I was a friend of theirs. When they had to disappear, they left me with instructions to help you if you ever came looking." Daniel's throat tightened. "What happened to them? Where are they now?" The man sighed, leaning back in his chair. "That's a long story, one I'm not sure you're ready to hear. But what I can tell you is this: they loved you more than anything. And they made sacrifices no one should ever have to make." Daniel clenched his fists. "I want to know everything. I deserve to know." The man nodded slowly. "You're right. But first, we need to make sure you're safe. There are people who've been looking for you, Daniel. People who wouldn't want you to know the truth." "What truth?" Daniel pressed, his voice rising. The man leaned in closer, his expression grave. "The truth about who you really are. And why you were hidden away." Daniel's head spun at the man's words. "Hidden away? What do you mean? Who are these people looking for me?" he demanded, his voice rising despite the low hum of conversation around the cafe. The man raised a hand, motioning for him to lower his voice. "Calm down. We don't have much time. If anyone finds out we're talking, they might come for you. Let me explain as much as I can." Daniel leaned in closer, gripping the edges of the table. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the brink of discovering something monumental. "Your parents weren't ordinary people," the man began, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were part of a group, a secret organization dedicated to uncovering corruption and protecting people from those in power. It was dangerous work, and they made powerful enemies. When you were born, they realized the risk they were taking. If their enemies found out about you, you'd be in danger too." Daniel's heart raced. "So, they hid me in the orphanage to protect me?" The man nodded. "Exactly. They didn't want to, but they didn't have a choice. It was the only way to keep you safe. They left clues, like the note and the key, to guide you if you ever needed to find the truth." Daniel's mind raced as he tried to process this new information. "But what happened to them? Are they still alive?" The man's face darkened. "I don't know for sure. The last time I saw them, they were being pursued by one of the most dangerous men in the organization's history, Victor Grayson. He's ruthless, and he has resources most people can't even imagine. If they survived, they've gone deep underground." Victor Grayson. Daniel repeated the name, committing it to memory. Why would someone like that be after them? "Because they uncovered something he didn't want anyone to know," the man replied. "Your parents discovered proof that Grayson was involved in illegal arms deals, money laundering, and human trafficking. They had the evidence to bring him down, and he knew it. That's why he went after them." Daniel's blood ran cold. He thought of the journal he'd found in the trunk, the frantic entries detailing the danger his parents faced. "And now he's after me," he said, his voice barely audible. The man nodded grimly. "You're their son. If Grayson finds out who you are, he'll assume you have access to their secrets. That makes you a target? Daniel felt a surge of anger. I didn't ask for any of this. I just want to know who I am. Why should I have to run for my life because of something my parents did? I know it's unfair, the man said gently. But you're stronger than you think, Daniel. Your parents believed in you, and they trusted that you'd be able to handle the truth when the time came. Daniel stared at the table, his mind racing. He thought of the photograph, the journal, the key, all the pieces of the puzzle his parents had left behind. They had risked everything to protect him, and now it was his turn to do the same for them. What do I do now? He asked, looking up at the man. The man leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You need to leave the city. It's not safe for you here. I know people who can help you, people who were part of your parents' network. They can get you to a safe house where you'll be protected. Daniel hesitated. And after that? Do I just hide forever? The man shook his head. Oh. Once you're safe, we'll figure out our next move. Your parents might still be alive, Daniel. If they are, they'll have left more clues for you to follow. But first, we need to make sure Grayson doesn't find you. Daniel swallowed hard, his determination growing. All right, let's do it. The man nodded. Good. Meet me at the train station tonight at midnight. We'll leave then. Daniel stood, his fists clenched at his sides. Thank you. For everything. The man smiled faintly. Your parents would be proud of you, Daniel. Stay strong. The hours until midnight crawled by. Daniel returned to the orphanage, his mind racing with everything he'd learned. He packed a small bag with the essentials, the photograph, the journal, and a few changes of clothes. He didn't know when or he'd be back. As the other children slept, Daniel sat by the window, staring out at the city. He thought of his parents, of the sacrifices they'd made for him. He thought of Victor Grayson, the man who had turned their lives upside down. And he thought of the future, of the challenges that lay ahead. When the clock struck midnight, Daniel slipped out of the dormitory and made his way to the train station. The streets were quiet, the city bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. His heart pounded as he approached the platform, half expecting to see Grayson's men waiting for him. But the man with the green scarf was there, just as he'd promised. He nodded when he saw Daniel and motioned for him to follow. They boarded a train headed out of the city, the hum of the engine drowning out the whirlwind of thoughts in Daniel's mind. As the train sped through the night, the man handed Daniel a small envelope. This is for you, he said. It's from your parents? Daniel's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in the same elegant handwriting as the journal entries. My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, it means you've grown into the brave young man we always knew you would be. We're sorry for everything you've had to endure, but we hope you understand that every decision we made was out of love for you. You are stronger than you realize, and you have a bright future ahead of you. Never forget who you are or where you come from. And remember, no matter what happens, we will always love you. Mom and Dad. Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he read the letter. For the first time in his life, he felt truly connected to the family he had lost. He vowed to honor their sacrifices and uncover the truth, no matter what it took. The train rolled on into the night, carrying Daniel toward an uncertain future. But for the first time, he felt a spark of hope, a sense that, despite the challenges ahead, he would find his way. The train pulled into a small, quiet station on the outskirts of a rural town. The man with the green scarf led Daniel off the platform, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of trouble. The cool night air was a stark contrast to the city's warmth, and Daniel pulled his jacket tighter around him as they walked. This way, the man whispered, motioning toward a dark path that wound into a thick forest. We're heading to the safe house. Daniel hesitated, glancing around nervously. The woods seemed foreboding, the towering trees casting long shadows under the moonlight. How far is it? He asked, his voice barely audible. Not far, the man assured him. Just stay close. They walked in silence, the crunch of leaves under their feet the only sound. Daniel's mind raced with questions he hadn't had the chance to ask earlier. What was your connection to my parents? He finally asked. The man glanced back at him, a faint smile playing on his lips. I was one of their closest allies. We worked together for years, exposing corruption and fighting for justice. They were incredible people, brave, selfless, and fiercely determined. When they disappeared, it was like losing family. Daniel's chest tightened at the thought of his parents' sacrifices. Do you think they're still alive? The man hesitated, his expression somber. I want to believe they are. Your parents were resourceful, and they had a knack for surviving impossible situations. But Grayson is a dangerous man. If he found them, Daniel didn't need him to finish the sentence. He already knew the stakes. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a small, secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods. The man knocked on the door in a rhythmic pattern, 3 short knocks, followed by 2 longer ones. The door creaked open, revealing a woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. "This is him," she asked, her gaze shifting to Daniel. The man nodded. "Yes, this is Daniel." The woman stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. "Come in. We've been expecting you." Daniel followed the man inside, his eyes darting around the dimly lit cabin. It was sparsely furnished, with a single table in the center and maps and documents spread across its surface. A few other people were gathered around the table, their faces serious as they examined the papers. "Daniel, this is our team," the man said, introducing the group. "We've been working in the shadows just like your parents did. And now we're here to help you." One of the team members, a young woman with a laptop in front of her, spoke up. "We've been monitoring Grayson's movements. He's tightening his grip on the city, and his men are everywhere. But we've found something your parents left behind." "What is it?" Daniel asked, his curiosity piqued. The woman turned her laptop toward him, displaying a map with a blinking red. "This is the location of a safe deposit box your parents set up before they disappeared. We believe it contains the evidence they were trying to protect." Daniel's heart raced. "How do we get to it?" The man interjected. "It won't be easy. The deposit box is in a bank in the city, and Grayson has eyes everywhere. We'll need to plan carefully if we're going to retrieve it." Daniel nodded, determination hardening his features. "I'll do whatever it takes." The team spent the next few hours devising a plan. They would split into 2 groups, one to create a distraction and draw Grayson's men away from the bank, and the other to accompany Daniel to retrieve the contents of the deposit box. The woman with the laptop handed Daniel a small device. "This will allow you to bypass the security system. Your parents designed it themselves." As dawn approached, the team prepared to set their plan in motion. Daniel felt a mix of fear and resolve. He knew the risks, but he also knew that the answers he sought were within reach. The city was eerily quiet as Daniel and his team approached the bank. The first group had already set their distraction in motion, drawing Grayson's men to the other side of town. Daniel wore a baseball cap and sunglasses to obscure his face, his heart pounding as they entered the building. The woman with the laptop guided him to the vault, her voice steady through his earpiece. "You're doing great, Daniel. Just stay calm." He approached the vault, inserting the device into the security panel. It beeped softly as it worked to override the system. Every second felt like an eternity as Daniel glanced nervously over his shoulder. Finally, the device emitted a soft chime, and the vault door clicked open. Daniel stepped inside, his breath catching as he saw the deposit box. He retrieved the key from his pocket, inserting it into the lock with trembling hands. The box contained a stack of documents, a USB drive, and a letter. Daniel quickly stuffed the contents into his bag, his pulse racing. "I've got it," he whispered into the earpiece. "Good," the woman replied. "Now get out of there." Daniel turned to leave, but as he exited the vault, he heard the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway. His blood ran cold as he saw a group of Grayson's men approaching, their expressions cold and menacing. "There he is," one of them shouted. Daniel bolted, adrenaline surging through his veins. He raced through the bank, the documents clutched tightly to his chest. His team was waiting for him outside, and as he burst through the doors, they ushered him into a waiting car. "Drive," the man with the green scarf shouted, and the car sped off, tires screeching. Back at the safe house, Daniel handed the documents and USB drive to the team. They worked quickly, scanning the papers and analyzing the data on the drive. "This is it," the woman with the laptop said, her voice filled with awe. "This is everything we need to bring Grayson down." Daniel felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. The man with the green scarf placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Daniel. Grayson won't go down without a fight. But thanks to you, we have a chance." Daniel nodded, his resolve stronger than ever. "Whatever it takes," he said. "I'll finish what my parents started." As the sun rose over the horizon, Daniel felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He was no longer just an orphan searching for answers. He was a fighter, ready to take on the challenges ahead. The room was tense as the team pored over the evidence Daniel had retrieved. Documents were spread across the table, each containing damning information about Grayson's criminal network. The USB drive held encrypted files, and the woman with the laptop, whom Daniel now knew as Nora, worked tirelessly to decode them. "This is massive," Nora muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Bribes, offshore accounts, illegal deals, Grayson's entire operation is documented here." Daniel leaned over her shoulder, his eyes scanning the screen. "What do we do with it? How do we take him down?" The man with the green scarf, who had introduced himself as Leon, spoke up. "We need to expose this to the public, but we can't just release it blindly. Grayson controls the media, the police, and half the city's government. If we're not careful, he'll bury this, and us, before anyone even sees it." Nora nodded in agreement. "We'll need to send this to someone with enough influence to protect it and make sure it goes public. But first, we have to ensure it's secure." Daniel's mind raced. "What about my parents? They must have had contacts, people they trusted to help them." Leon's expression softened. "They did, but most of those people have gone into hiding or disappeared. Grayson's reach is long." A heavy silence fell over the room as the weight of the situation settled on them. Daniel felt a pang of frustration. He had risked everything to retrieve the evidence, and now it felt like they were at an impasse. "We don't have time to hesitate," he said, his voice firm. "If we wait too long, Grayson will find us. We need to act now." Leon exchanged a glance with Nora, then nodded. "You're right. We'll contact someone we can trust, a journalist who's been working to expose Grayson for years. If anyone can get this out, it's her." The team worked quickly to package the evidence. Nora transferred the decrypted files onto a secure drive while Leon prepared a burner phone to contact the journalist. Daniel felt the mixture of anticipation and anxiety as he watched them. Every step they took brought them closer to the confrontation he knew was inevitable. The plan was simple. Daniel and Leon would deliver the drive to the journalist, while the rest of the team stayed behind to monitor the situation and provide support. It was risky, but they had no other choice. As they left the safe house, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The quiet streets felt too quiet, and every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. "Are you sure this is safe?" he asked Leon. "Nothing about this is safe," Leon replied, his voice low. "But it's necessary. Stay close to me and don't draw attention." They made their way to a small cafe on the edge of town, where the journalist had agreed to meet them. The woman was already waiting, her sharp eyes scanning the room as they entered. She stood as they approached, her demeanor cautious but determined. "You have something for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leon nodded, handing her the drive. "This contains everything you need to expose Grayson. But you need to be careful. He'll come after you the moment he finds out." The journalist tucked the drive into her bag, her expression resolute. "I've been preparing for this moment for years. Grayson's had the city in a stranglehold for too long. It's time to bring him down." Daniel felt a flicker of hope as he listened to her. For the first time, it felt like they had a real chance of making a difference. As they left the cafe, the atmosphere shifted. Daniel noticed a black SUV parked across the street, its tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. His pulse quickened as the engine roared to life and the vehicle began to follow them. "Liam," he whispered, his voice tinged with urgency. "We're being followed." Leon glanced over his shoulder, his expression hardening. "Keep walking. Don't look back." They turned down a side street, their pace quickening. The SUV followed, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Leon grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him into an alley. "We have to lose them." The sound of footsteps echoed behind them as several men emerged from the SUV, their intentions clear. Daniel's heart pounded as he and Leon darted through the alley, weaving through narrow passages and climbing over fences. The men pursued them relentlessly, their shouts growing louder. "We can't outrun them," Daniel gasped, his lungs burning. "Then we fight," Leon said, his tone resolute. They stopped in a small courtyard, the men closing in around them. Leon pulled out a concealed knife, his stance defensive. Daniel clenched his fists, ready to fight despite his fear. One of the men stepped forward, a cruel smile on his face. "Hand over the drive, and we might let you live." "You're too late," Leon said coldly. "The drive is already gone." The man's smile faded, replaced by anger. "Then you're useless to us." The fight that ensued was brutal. Leon moved with precision, his knife a blur as he took down two of the men. Daniel fought with everything he had, his adrenaline giving him strength. Despite their efforts, they were outnumbered, and the situation seemed grim. Just as the men began to overpower them, the sound of sirens filled the air. The remaining attackers scattered, disappearing into the night. Daniel and Leon were left battered but alive. Back at the safe house, the team tended to their injuries and regrouped. Nora informed them that the journalist had already begun leaking the evidence to trusted media outlets. The story was spreading, and the public was starting to take notice. Grayson's hold on the city began to crumble as more people came forward with testimonies and evidence of his crimes. Protests erupted, demanding justice and accountability. Daniel watched the news with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that his parents' work was finally making a difference. But the fight wasn't over. Grayson was still at large, and Daniel knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. "What happens now?" he asked Leon. "Now we finish this," Leon replied. "Grayson is desperate, and that makes him dangerous. But he's also vulnerable. This is our chance to take him down for good." Daniel nodded, determination burning in his chest. "I'm ready." The next few days were a whirlwind. The leaked evidence caused a media frenzy, with news outlets across the city and beyond reporting on Grayson's corrupt empire. Public outrage grew with each revelation, and even some of Grayson's closest allies began to distance themselves from him. But as the pressure mounted, so did the danger. Grayson's men were still searching for Daniel and his team, and the safe house no longer felt safe. Leon decided it was time to go on the offensive. "We can't wait for him to come to us," Leon said, gathering the team around the table. "We have to strike now, while he's scrambling." "How?" Nora asked. "Grayson still has resources, and his men are everywhere. If we make a wrong move, he'll take us out." Leon spread a map of the city on the table, pointing to a heavily guarded compound on the outskirts. "This is his main base of operations. It's where he's holed up, trying to control the situation. If we can get in there and take him down, this will all be over." Daniel's stomach churned at the thought of confronting Grayson face to face, but he knew Leon was right. "What's the plan?" Leon outlined a daring strategy. They would use the chaos in the city to their advantage, slipping past Grayson's guards under the cover of a protest happening nearby. Once inside the compound, they would locate Grayson and cut off his last remaining lines of defense. The night of the operation was tense. Daniel, Leon, and the rest of the team moved through the crowded streets, blending in with the protesters. The air was electric with chants and signs demanding justice, and Daniel felt a surge of hope as he saw how many people were standing up against Grayson. "Stay close," Leon murmured, leading the way toward the compound. As they approached the perimeter, the noise of the protest provided cover for their movements. Nora hacked into the compound's surveillance system, creating blind spots for the team to slip through. They scaled the fence and made their way inside, their footsteps silent on the gravel. Inside, the compound was a maze of hallways and locked doors. Leon took the lead, his knife at the ready, while Nora guided them through the layout using a tablet. "Grayson's in his office," she whispered through their earpieces. "Third floor, northeast corner." They moved quickly but cautiously, avoiding patrols and security cameras. As they reached the third floor, Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He clenched his fists, bracing himself for what was to come. Grayson's office was heavily guarded. Two men stood outside the door, their expressions cold and unyielding. Leon signaled for the team to take positions, and within moments, they launched a coordinated attack. The guards were taken down swiftly, and Leon motioned for Daniel to follow him inside. The office was opulent, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Grayson sat at a massive desk, his face pale but defiant as they entered. "So," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you've won?" Daniel stepped forward, his anger boiling over. "You destroyed my family. You tried to bury the truth. But now everyone knows who you really are." Grayson's lips curled into a sneer. "Do you think the truth matters? People like me don't fall because of a few leaks. I'll rebuild and you'll be nothing but a footnote." Leon drew his knife, his expression deadly. "Not this time, Grayson. Your empire is crumbling, and there's nowhere left for you to hide." For a moment, Grayson's composure faltered. His eyes darted toward a panic button on the side of his desk, but before he could press it, Daniel lunged forward, slamming his hand down. "You're done," Daniel said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You'll pay for everything you've done." The rest of the team arrived, securing the room and ensuring Grayson couldn't escape. Nora contacted the authorities, providing them with Grayson's location and the remaining evidence they had collected. Within minutes, sirens blared outside the compound as police stormed the building. Grayson was taken into custody, his face a mixture of rage and defeat. The team watched as he was led away in handcuffs, the weight of their victory beginning to sink in. Daniel felt a surge of relief but also a lingering sadness. The fight was over, but his parents were still gone, and the wounds left by their loss remained. Leon placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Daniel. Your parents would be proud." Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This isn't just about them. It's about everyone Grayson hurt. They deserve justice too." In the weeks that followed, the city began to heal. Grayson's trial became a symbol of accountability, and his conviction sent shockwaves through the corrupt networks he had built. The team disbanded, each member returning to their own lives but staying in touch as a newfound family. For Daniel, life would never be the same. He had discovered his strength and purpose, carrying on his parents' legacy and fighting for what was right. As he walked through the city streets, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The note in his backpack had led him on a journey he could never have imagined. A journey that changed not only his life but the lives of countless others. And for the first time, he felt truly free. Months had passed since Grayson's empire fell. The city was finally beginning to recover. The corrupt officials tied to him were exposed one by one, and the legal reforms that Daniel's parents had once dreamed of were being discussed in public forums. For the first time, there was hope that the city could transform into a place where justice prevailed over greed. Daniel stood on the steps of City Hall, staring at the podium where speakers addressed the crowd. A public gathering had been organized to honor those who had fought against corruption and to commemorate the lives lost to Grayson's greed, including Daniel's parents. As he scanned the crowd, he recognized familiar faces. Nora, with her confident smirk and tablet in hand, Leon, standing protectively near the edges of the gathering, his sharp eyes scanning for trouble, and members of the protest group who had braved the streets to demand change. They had all played a part in this victory. The mayor took the stage, addressing the crowd. "Today, we remember those who stood up against tyranny, those who risked everything to expose the truth. Their courage reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there is light." Daniel felt a lump in his throat as the mayor read out his parents' names, followed by a moment of silence. He thought about how much they had sacrificed and how they had planted the seeds of change long before their deaths. After the ceremony, Nora approached Daniel. "You know, your parents would have been proud. You didn't just honor their legacy, you became part of it." Daniel smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel like enough. There's still so much to fix." "That's the point," Nora said. "It's not about fixing everything. It's about taking one step at a time." Over the next few months, Daniel found himself stepping into a new role. His name had become synonymous with the movement to rebuild the city. He began working with local organizations, advocating for policies his parents had championed. At first, he felt out of place. He wasn't a politician or an activist by trade. But with Nora's tech-savvy mind and Leon's strategic guidance, he navigated the complex world of advocacy. They helped him organize events, connect with community leaders, and use the media to amplify their message. One day, while cleaning out his parents' old study, Daniel came across a notebook filled with his father's handwritten notes. Inside were sketches for a community center that his parents had dreamed of building, a place where people could come together, access resources, and find support. Inspired, Daniel set out to make that dream a reality. The community center opened a year later. Its walls were lined with photographs of activists, journalists, and everyday citizens who had fought for justice. At the center of the main hall hung a plaque dedicated to Daniel's parents, with the words, "For those who believe in a better tomorrow." The opening ceremony was packed with people, former protesters, community members, and even some of Daniel's old classmates who had come to show their support. Nora gave a speech, her usual sarcasm replaced with heartfelt gratitude. Leon, ever the stoic protector, stayed in the background but watched with pride. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood at the podium, his voice steady but filled with emotion. This center isn't just a building. It's a promise. A promise that we won't let greed and corruption define our city. A promise that we'll fight for each other, no matter how hard it gets. And it's a promise I made to my parents, to honor their work and carry it forward. As the crowd erupted into applause, Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living, fighting, and building something that mattered. In the years that followed, the city continued to evolve. The community center became a hub for change, and Daniel became a symbol of resilience and hope. He knew the fight for justice would never truly end, but he was ready for it. And every time he walked through the center's doors, he felt his parents' presence, guiding him forward. Their note had led him to this moment, a journey of loss, truth, and transformation. And now he carried their legacy in his heart, knowing that they would always be with him.